Lars and Karen Anderson looked out over the field. The rich, dark brown soil of Wisconsin reminded them of the best farmland back in Sweden. Lars knelt down and scooped up some dirt in his hand, and Karen thought, Lars can read the soil the way some people can read books. Somehow, he knows if it's good or bad for growing crops. Now, Lars stood up. This is fine land, he told his wife. She could hear excitement in his voice. Here we will grow wheat and corn. Over there, he said, pointing. We can raise dairy cows for milk and butter. Karen walked a few feet away and said, and over here we can build a house and raise a family. Yes, Lars agreed. That is the most important thing of all. The Andersons, like many other immigrants who settled in the American Midwest, came from Northern Europe. This means they emigrated from countries like Germany, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and other nearby European nations, and then moved to the United States. These immigrants brought with them their knowledge of farming and a strong sense of working together as families and as neighbors. Immigrants like the Andersons came to the United States because they could not own land in Europe. In Europe, kings and princes kept tight control over who was allowed to buy and own land. People who were not friends of the king or of a rich nobleman or noblewoman whose family had owned land for many years had trouble buying farmland. Without owning farmland, it was hard for many people in Northern Europe to make a living. Friends of the Andersons who had already settled in Wisconsin and nearby Minnesota had written letters back home to Sweden saying, "Join us in America. Things are different in the United States. Here, you don't have to be the king's friend to buy and own land. You just have to be willing to work very hard." During the American Civil War in 1862, the American government under President Lincoln gave huge amounts of government-controlled land to homesteaders. A homestead is land someone settles on to live and farm. The government made it easy for farmers to own as much as 160 acres of land, which was more than enough for a successful farm. A homesteader had to build a house on the land and farm the land for at least 5 years. At the end of that time, for a fee of $18, the person or family would legally own the land. Many different people could become homesteaders. For example, unmarried men or women could become homesteaders. People coming to America as immigrants could become homesteaders. The United States gave all sorts of people a chance to own land and make a new life. Millions of people from across the United States and immigrants from many other nations came to the Midwest to learn their farming skills and work hard to build up the United States. With the hope of owning land and making a better life for themselves and their children, Karen and Lars sold nearly everything they owned in Sweden, bought tickets to America, crossed the sea on a ship, and ended up among the low, gently rolling hills of Wisconsin. Now that they had made it to Wisconsin, they had to decide what to do with their land. Lars said to Karen, "We will leave that patch of forest for now and start with the land that is already cleared. We will get a mule and a plow to loosen the soil and get the land ready to plant. To afford this, we will have to borrow some money and add that to the money we still have left from Sweden. And we will build a house," Karen said. "It doesn't have to be a big one. We can add on to it later when we're more settled and have earned more money." And that is what they did. All across the Midwest of the United States, other immigrant farmers were doing the same things, working hard and starting a new life. Working long, hard hours, immigrants and other homesteaders turned the American Midwest into some of the finest farmland on earth. Pitching in to help one another through hard times and sharing the joy of one another's successes in this new land. With the help of their neighbors, the Andersons built a house partly shaded by the trees they had decided to leave standing. They built a barn and painted it red. They grew wheat and corn to sell and paid back the money they owed. They watched over every dollar they earned and every penny they spent. In time, both the little house and their family grew bigger. They now had a boy, Stefan, and 2 girls, Ingrid and Margareta. One day, 5 years after they arrived in the United States and claimed their land, the Andersons were ready to pay their $18 so that their land, along with the house, barn, and farmland, would be theirs, officially approved by those in charge. That morning, the whole family took their turns bathing in the large metal tub in the kitchen, and to which they poured warm water heated on the stove. Because it was such a special day, they dressed in their best clothes, which they usually save for church. Karen even dressed up the little girls, Margareta, in her best outfit. Then Lars said, "It is time. Everyone get into the wagon." With a cry of "Get up!" To the two mules he had hitched to the front of the wagon, Lars shook the reins, and they started down the 5 miles of dirt road toward town. As they passed each neighboring farm, the neighbors waved and called out, "Congratulations, Karen," or "We're proud of you, Lars." Karen and Lars waved back and smiled. They were grateful for the support of their neighbors. At last the Andersons reached town. Lars stopped the wagon in front of a government building and helped Karen and the children from the wagon. They walked inside and up to the counter. Proudly Lars told the clerk, "Good morning, Mr. Elgard. We have come to claim our land." Less than 5 minutes later, Mr. Elgard smiled and held out his hand to shake. "Congratulations, Lars," he said. "Congratulations, Karen." Then he turned to the two oldest children, Stefan and Ingrid, and said, "And congratulations to you too. Thanks to your mother and father, one day you will own the land too." And Lars and Karen Anderson, farmers and now official landowners, proudly walked out the door and took their family home.